This video is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your generous support in funding this channel and keeping it up and running. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Desolate Lighthouse, the show where I take a commander that was very recently previewed and then I build a deck for it and I go through as a deck tech here on the channel. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about Nethroi, Apex of Death. But before we jump into it, I do want to mention that this deck tech is going to be a little bit different than the ones I've done already. So for Gyruda and for Illuna and for Otrimi. So those deck techs for other commanders from Commander 2020 or from Ikoria going to be a little bit different than this one. And as I go through it, you'll understand why that is. So let's go ahead and start talking about this deck, starting off with the commander itself here, which is Nethroi, Apex of Death. So normally a 5-mana legendary 5/5 cat nightmare beast, but it's got mutate for 7. So if we cast this spell for its mutate cost, put it over or under target non-human creature you own, they mutate into the creature on top, plus all abilities from under it. Normally it's a 5/5 Death Touch lifelink, but whenever this creature mutates, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, one of the ways that this deck is very different than all the other decks that I've talked about so far for Desolate Lighthouse is that for all those other decks, we're taking the commander, we're looking at the ability, okay, what is going to be the best thing that I can do with this ability? And that's going to be the way to figure out what I wanted to go with the deck. Instead, with Nethroi, I had to do something a little bit different. This ability here definitely counts as recursion, so the question becomes, what decks, what strategies are going to do the best with recursion? In my experience, recursion is great when you've got individual pieces that you need to have back. If they're not important to have those individual pieces, then recursion is not going to be as great as, let's say, card draw or anything like that, where recursion can kind of help, but card draw will help you draw into more things and do more things than what your opponents are anticipating, than what they can deal with. And so in that way, if you're doing something that needs specific cards, then you're going to want to have recursion. If you're not, then you're going to want to have card draw. Obviously, you're going to want to have card draw either way, but recursion is best when the cards themselves matter individually based on what their abilities are. There's not a replacement for it. You got to have it. So that made me think, okay, Nethroi definitely opens itself up to a combo-based build better than anything else. Whereas other, commanders and strategies, sometimes they're combos, sometimes they're not. When you're using recursion like this, you're definitely going to want to be interested in going for a combo-based deck. Not just because it allows you to have that resiliency, where somebody can target one of your creatures, they go to the graveyard, you use your commander to bring it back. You have that resiliency where you're continuing to recur those same creatures. But on top of that, you also have redundancy in the effect. That creature dies, you don't have to dig to try to find another piece that's similar. You can just recur that creature from the graveyard, and now you've got your redundant piece. So resiliency and redundancy is what makes Nethroi, I think, best suited for a combo-based build. Now the question becomes, what combo do we want to do? I mean, there's so many different combos you can do in Abzan, and personally, I like to do something a little bit on the spicier side. Now, this is a combo that I think a lot of people have seen in one form or another. I've even used it on my channel before. But I did research a long time ago, and I actually used that research for this deck build, of what color combination would be best for this type of combo, and I found out it is Abzan by far. Abzan is definitely the best color combination for this combo. And so now that I've talked about why I'm picking Nethroi, what Nethroi is doing for the deck, and we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more as we go through this, let's go and start talking about the combo. So the combo is unique in that it is probably the most pieces to a combo that I've ever been excited to play. Normally, when you've got 4 pieces to a combo, that sounds like, okay, that's just janky. That's not that consistent. It's just going to be like every now and then, again, you'll be able to combo out, and it's not really going to be that reliable. However, that's not always true. I think why people think that when it comes to 4-card combos is because when you've got 4 cards, you're getting more and more likely that one of those pieces or more than one of those pieces are unique. You're not able to find redundant pieces to replace that. This is why this deck is different. We're using a 4-card combo. However, each one of those 4 cards has 7 other cards in the deck that can replace it. So that's 8 cards in the first category, 8 cards in the second category, 8 cards in the third category, and 8 cards in the fourth category. And on top of that, all 32 of those cards are creatures. Now, some of them have a little bit higher, power. There's some that have power 5 or power 4. but a lot of them have low power, so that kind of helps us out with Nethroi only being able to bring back creatures with total power 10 or less. Alright, so let's go ahead and start talking about the individual combo. And once you see this first piece, you might already know what the rest of the combo is, but if not, I'm going to go through it so you can see how exactly this works. First piece we've got is a Persist creature. Literally any creature that has Persist that says, when this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So when this dies, it's going to come back with a -1/-1 counter. However, we can get rid of that -1/-1 counter either by an effect that says creatures can't get -1/-1 counters on them, like Melira, or with a card like Anafenza Kintree Spirit that whenever a creature enters a battlefield, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. Now, this is a little bit of I guess maybe a rule secret. Most of you probably already know this, but if you're new to the game, you might not realize that if you ever put a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on a creature at the same time, if you get to have priority as a state-based action, those counters get removed. Now, if you don't get to have priority, if that creature dies immediately while it has those counters on him, they don't, cancel out. So you want to make sure that you're not like bringing back Safehold Elite with 3 -1/-1 counters on it and 3 +1/+1 counters or something along those lines where, well, I guess that doesn't count, but maybe 3 -1/-1 counters and a 1 +1/+1 counter. It's still going to die with the +1/+1 counter, so it's not going to work out like, let's say you need it for Undying purposes. But yeah, we've also got Undying, Anafenza Kintree Spirit, things that put +1/+1 counters, things that prevent it from being able to get -1/-1 counters. That's category number 2. Category number 3 is a free sack outlet. So we're not paying any mana, we're not tapping creatures. The only cost to the ability on these creatures is sacrifice a creature or sacrifice a permanent. And we wanted to include ones that allowed them to sacrifice themselves, just because if someone wants to exile, one of our sack outlets, we can sacrifice it and get it back with Nethroi later. And then the third piece here is something that sees when a creature enters or dies. So Safehold Elite, Anafenza Kintree Spirit, Viscera Seer, and Zulaport Cutthroat. If we've got all 4 of these cards on the battlefield, what we can do is we can sacrifice the Safehold Elite to the Viscera Seer. It will persist. It will come back into play. That will, its death will trigger the Zulaport Cutthroat and the Persist ability. We can, put the Persist on the stack first, and then Zulaport. Zulaport will resolve. We'll make each opponent lose 1 life, and we'll gain 1 life. Safehold Elite will come back onto the battlefield, triggering Anafenza. We can put that +1/+1 counter on the Safehold Elite, canceling out the -1/-1 counter, and we've reset our board. We're back to where we started, and for 0 mana, we've made each opponent lose 1 life. So with 4 cards like this, we can win the game. All right, so that was definitely a unique thing here. I don't usually talk about specific combos, whereas I usually talk about like the actual categories. But now that we've got this out of the way, let's go and talk about the categories and each one of these individual pieces. So the first category that we had were Persist Creatures, and these are the Persist Creatures we're choosing to include here. There are multiple Persist Creatures that we did not include. If you want to include them as well, that's up to you. I felt that having exactly 8 of each category is going to make it pretty consistent. We're going to have card draw, we're going to have recursion with our commander. So I didn't feel like it was necessary to go up to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of any of these categories, but if you wanted to, you certainly could. You definitely could. So we've got Heartmender, Kitchen Finks, Lesser Manticore, Lingering Tormentor, Putrid Goblin, Rend Clawtro, Restless Apparition, and Safehold Elite as our Persist Creatures. In terms of things that will undo the Persist, or rather, fix the Persist problem, we've got 9 cards here. 8 of these are creatures. The 9th card here, that's not a creature, is included because it's also good for card draw, so it's kind of incidental help. It wasn't in here for the purpose of, fixing Persist Creatures. But since we've got it for a draw anyways, we might as well include it to this category. So Anafenza Kintree Spirit, Bloodspore Thrynax, Good Fortune Unicorn, Juniper Order Ranger, Melira Sylvok Outcast, Mikaeus the Unhallowed, Renata Call to the Hunt, The Great Henge, and Vizier of Remedies are going to be the 9 cards that we're going to be using to get rid of that -1/-1 counter from the Persist Creature that dies. So Mikaeus is going to be doing it by, one time it will persist, another time it will undie, and then it'll persist, and then it'll undie. Persist, undie, persist, undie. So we're kind of flipping back and forth between undying and persisting. So that's how Mikaeus works. We've got Melira Sylvok Outcast and Vizier of Remedies. Both of those work as as a way to, when that creature enters the battlefield, instead of getting that -1/-1 counter, it doesn't get it at all. So we're not even putting a +1/+1 counter on that creature. The rest of these do work that way. Whenever the creature enters, it either gets it as a triggered ability, or it'll just plain out enter with it already there, like with Renata. So that's kind of the idea behind these 9 cards. And you'll again notice 8 of them are creatures. Mikaeus is a pretty high-powered creature, which is unfortunate. We're not looking to have cards like that, but we've got that available for us to be able to use if we need it. All right, so that's the second category. Third category is sack outlets. And this is one big reason why no matter what you're doing, if you want to do a persist combo style deck, you definitely want to have black. Without black, you're not going to have that many great sacrifice outlets. I mean, there are a couple of colorless ones, and obviously there's some enchantments as well. There's a white enchantment or two. But when we want to have creatures specifically for our commander Nethroi, we want to have black. So Bloodfoe, Connoisseur, Bloodthrone Vampire, Carrion Feeder, Devouring Swarm, Nantuko Husk, Phyrexian Ghoul, Vampire Aristocrat, and Viscera Seer are going to be the 8 creatures that we're going to be using to bring them back. Now, a couple of these cards are also pretty interesting to have additional benefits. With Nantuko Husk, if we can bring back enough creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield with our mutate ability from Nethroi, we can actually use that, attack with a bunch of creatures, see if Nantuko Husk doesn't get blocked, and if it doesn't, we can sacrifice all those creatures, make Nantuko Husk potentially lethal. So there's a little bit of extra value here with cards that do that effect, getting a little bit bigger off of sacrificing creatures. So that's kind of the idea here, why we've chosen these and, you know, maybe not other ones like Dross Horde or something along those lines. So that's kind of the idea here between the sack outlets. And then the last category here, 8 creatures that will trigger on creature entering or dying. And that way we can use these cards to make opponents lose life or get dealt damage. So Blood Artist, Corpse Knight, Cruel Celebrant, Falconwrath Noble, Poison Tip Archer, Sir Conrad the Grim, Vindictive Vampire, and Zulaport Cutthroat. So there you can see 32 cards that are basically the bulk of the deck. Almost a third of the entire library, and we're using that just for the combo. Again, it is a 4-piece combo, but I think this shows why you can't just say, okay, I'm not going to use any 4-piece combos. Those are never going to be good. This can actually show you that you can still do a 4-card combo and have it be pretty consistent. So that's kind of one benefit here from this, especially if you're telling your opponents, look, I got combos in here, but it's going to take four cards. So really, you know, you shouldn't be too afraid of me. And I'm not saying to say that to try to trick your opponents, but you can be completely truthful with that and still have a really good combo deck at the same time. All right, so that's going to be the triggers from entering or leaving. Again, everything here is going to be dealing damage to opponents or making them lose lives. So if someone's got an Eldrazi in their deck, we don't have to worry about, okay, are they going to, you know, shuffle their graveyard back in because my card that's going to try to kill them is trying to mill them out or something along those lines. We're, you know, maybe I'm just trying to gain life. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to kill our opponents when we do the combo. We want to do it fast. In terms of the next category here, pretty important for most combo decks. I didn't want to run too many of these just because if you do play a lot of tutors, what will happen is your opponents will feel like you're just tutoring up the piece to win. And you want to be able to do that occasionally, but you don't want to always do that. And because of that, I felt like this deck was so consistent without these tutors that you really don't want to play, too many of them. But you do want to have a couple, obviously, if you want to have a board wipe or card draw or anything like that. We've got Demonic Tutor, Finale Devastation, Uncage the Menagerie, and Vampiric Tutor. One cool thing, by the way, Uncage the Menagerie. I don't normally like this card in my decks, but going for X equals 2 or X equals 3 can let you find like 2 or 3 pieces from all of these cards. And I think there might even be a single line where you can go X equals 4. So you can actually get all 4 pieces with one card costing just 6 mana, which to me is, I think that's the best rate you can have to assemble any combo. You can completely find everything you need as a 4-card combo for just 6 mana. That's pretty good. So I like that one a lot. In terms of the next category, obviously we don't want to just have tutors. We want to have some card draw as well to draw into those combo pieces. So we've got Compost, Death Reap, Ritual, Fecundity, Grim Haruspex, Guardian Project, Moldervine Reap. I think that's what this card, right? Moldervine Reap, Phyrexian Arena, Skullclamp, and the Great Henge. So we've got a couple of things here that allow us to draw cards also when creatures enter. It's a little bit of a risk, obviously, if you're playing Guardian Project. It's not a May ability. You got the Great Henge. That's not a May ability. When you go for that Persist combo, suddenly you're going to be drawing through your deck, and you've got to find a way to get rid of the Great Henge before, drawing too many cards literally kills you. So again, there's a little bit of give and take here. Personally, I think it's fine where if you have enough mana to go for the combo and then draw into spot removal to deal with one of these pieces, go for it. If you don't, then you wait until the next turn until you do. Otherwise, I mean, these cards are going to be great for you to draw through your deck when you're just playing a bunch of creatures anyways. So you can just get down Guardian Project, use Nethroi, maybe not even getting the combo, you just get a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield, you just draw a bunch of cards from your commander. So that's also not too bad. So that's why I decided to include them in spite of the risk. If you don't like it, then obviously you can change them to be cards that will not kill you when you go for the Persist combo, but I think it's fine, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. For ramp, we've got Burnished Heart, which synergizes with our commander, Carpet of Flowers, Dowsing Dagger, Elemental Resonance, Frontier Siege, Mirari's Wake, Overgrowth, Soul Ring, Thran Dynamo, The Great Henge, and Warren Power Stone. And I'm looking now, this is kind of a lot of ramp. We do want to be able to make sure that we can get that 7 mana that we need in order to cast our commander. Some games we won't need to do that, but if we see that our combo pieces are getting destroyed or they get milled somehow, we want to make sure that we can get them back with Nethroi. If we don't have that 7 mana, that's not going to happen. There are a couple of cards on here that I think are great. Dowsing Dagger, I'd like to try out with this deck since we've got so many cheap creatures. I don't see too much of an issue with, you know, turn 2 you get down a creature and then, or maybe turn 1 you get down a creature, turn 2 you get down Dowsing Dagger, and then turn 3 equip and swing. So you can really do a lot of cool things that way, where on turn 3, there should be one person out there who doesn't have any blockers. So with that, you can get that flipped and make 3 mana. Now, there's another card here that I forgot to include. I would definitely want to include Smothering Tithe as well. We've got the colors for it. That should be a great card to include here. So sorry about that. I forgot to include it, but it is something that would be great to include. And if you want to cut down on the ramp, that's also another option as well. In terms of board wipes, we've got just 4. Boom Pile, Decree of Pain, Hour of Revelation, and Living Death. These are pretty great. Living Death is kind of nice because it's another way that we can get back all those creatures from our graveyard in case we need that, in case we need to do that. So that's kind of an additional benefit there. It is a little bit risky because if an opponent is milling themselves, or if the game has gone pretty long and they've got a lot of creatures in their graveyard, Living Death might not work as a board wipe anymore. But I feel like it's worth the risk here that we can use it and just go for a win immediately. That should be worth it, I think, in this situation. Let me know if you guys agree or if you disagree with me. In terms of spot removal, we've got 6 cards here. We've got Anguish Unmaking, Assassin's Trophy, Darksteel Mutation, D-Spark, Generous Gift, and Song of the Dryads. And you'll notice 2 of these cards are very unique. That'll be in this next category as well. It will be cards that work as hosers, so they kind of turn off an entire deck. We've got Constant Crackdown for artifact-based decks, and even decks that are not based around artifacts. If they've got a lot of artifact-based ramp, Constant Crackdown can take care of them as well. But the 2 that I was referring in the earlier category, Darksteel Mutation and Song of the Dryads, if there's a deck that's relying specifically on their commander, and I made this example before, but I'll say it again, you've got someone playing Nekusar or the Ur-Dragon, and they've cast it. It doesn't work if they're in the command zone still. The Eminence, it's Eminence, okay? So we're not going to go into that. But if they've got a commander out in the battlefield and you know that's going to be a problem, they've got enough devotion maybe to turn a Perfrose God of the Forge online, you know that commander is going to be a problem, you can use Darksteel Mutation, you can use Song of the Dryads, if you're playing blue, you can also use Imprison the Moon, but you can use these cards, put it on their commander, and now, unless they've got a way to sacrifice a land, or sacrifice, in the case of Darksteel Mutation, sacrifice a creature, or destroy an enchantment, they've got no way to get back their commander. Unlike Frogify, where they just need to have a way to destroy any creature. They got a murder in hand, it works. So it's not. I don't like those as much as Darksteel Mutation, Song of the Dryads, and of course Imprison in the Moon. That's it for the non-mana base cards in this deck. Let's go ahead and jump into the mana base, starting off with the non-lands in the mana base. So these are being evaluated as though they are lands. Obviously, Sol Ring also counts as ramp, and so does Carpet of Flowers. But for the most part, we're including these as lands for our calculations, just because we want to make sure that we're not drawing into too many cards that will act as lands, both from the opening hand standpoint and throughout the game. We don't want to get mana flooded. So Carpet of Flowers, Expedition Map, Sol Ring, and Weathered Wayfarer here. They're in the deck to be added as lands. Sometimes they're even better than lands, even though they do cost mana. So kind of nice there. In terms of non-basics, we've got a bunch here. We've got Arid Mesa, Bayou, Bloodstained Mire, Flooded Strand, Godless Shrine, Croson Verge, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Overgrown Tomb, Polluted Delta, Prismatic Vista, Savannah, Scavenger Grounds, Scrubland, Strip Mine, Temple Garden, Thespian Stage, Verdant Catacombs, Vesuva, Volrath Stronghold, Windswept Heath, and Wooded Foothills as our non-basics. Now, you don't have to run these non-basics. This is just what I would consider to be the kind of the best version of the mana base for a deck like this. If this is outside your budget, pretty easy. I mean, if the whole deck's outside your budget, it's pretty easy to convert it. All you got to do is find out which ones are the most expensive, cut those down until you get within your budget, and then either add in cards you already owned to replace those cards you took out. So obviously, if you take out a land, add in a land. Or find cards that would also work pretty good for this deck. We're not in the original deck, but would be good and in your budget. You just add those in. So very, very easy to convert this into a budget deck. And of course, in this category, there's going to be a lot of expensive cards. Obviously, Savannah, Scrubland, Bayou. Those are hundreds of dollars in paper. They're very cheap on Magic Online where I play, but they are very expensive in paper. So if you don't want to include these specific lands, very easy to just replace them with cards that you actually can run. In terms of basics, very simple spread here. We've got 3 plains, 3 swamps, and 3 forests, and that is the deck for Nethroi, Apex of Death. What do you think about this deck? I actually really like Persist combo as an archetype. I think it's very, very unique in that each one of the pieces, each one of the categories has a lot of redundant pieces. This is kind of the same idea behind why I like Sharoom, the Hegemon, as well. You've got the commander, and you've got 2 or 3 pieces that work with the commander, and those pieces are very easy to find, very redundant, and so that works out pretty well here. I think this might be the only example of a combo that's 4 pieces. However, each one of those pieces in a 3-color deck, you can have up to 12 of a single category, but each category has at least 8 cards that works for that role in the combo. So I had a lot of fun making this deck, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching it. The next one I'd like to do is the new Boros Companion. I don't know how soon I'll be able to get that one out, but I will try my best to get that out as quickly as possible. If you like this show and my other shows where I do deck gameplay, deck doctors for my patrons, or deck techs just in general, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Stay awesome.